Greetings from the hilltop. Welcome to today's webinar, Sporting Events in a Post-Pandemic World, the Effect on the 2020 Tokyo Olympics, sponsored by Georgetown McDonough's Office of Alumni Relations. We're so glad to have you on the line, and thank you for taking time out of your work days to connect virtually with us. I'm Ashley Shea, Georgetown Alumni Relations Program Coordinator at Georgetown University, and I will be facilitating today's webinar. Before we get started, I'd like to share a few tips and reminders. This webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be made available on our website and YouTube channel in the next few days. You will receive the link to the recording in a follow-up email, which will also contain a post-webinar survey for you to take, information on upcoming events, and more ways to stay connected to Georgetown McDonough. We will take questions throughout the webinar. Please send us your questions as you have them using the Q&A function at the bottom of the Zoom screen. Finally, if you're having any technical difficulties or other issues, please submit those concerns to me via the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen as well. Today, we are joined by Madeline Higgins, class of 2016, who is a marketing specialist on the Sports Partnership Development Team at NBC Universal Media. We also have Craig Escherek, class of 1978 and former Georgetown basketball coach, currently serving as the Associate Director at Center for Sport Management at George Mason University. Dr. Lakita Frederick, Faculty Director and Associate Professor of the Practice for Sport Industry Management, Master of Professional Studies program at the School of Continuing Studies, will moderate today's conversation. With that, I am pleased to turn things over to Dr. Frederick, and thank you for both joining us today.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today. I'm really excited to moderate this conversation. I generally get excited about all topics that are in the sports realm because that is what we do. As was mentioned, I'm the current faculty director and associate professor of the practice for the Sports Industry Management program here at the Georgetown School of Continuing Studies. Prior to joining Georgetown, I did spend some time at a couple of other universities. However, I actually spent about 15 years of my career actually working in the sports industry. I worked for both professional teams as well as several collegiate athletic teams, including two Power Five, one in the ACC, one in the Big Ten. So I do feel really comfortable in the space of sport management, not just academically, but industry-wide as well. I would like to ask my panelists to also introduce themselves and give a little bit of a background, and then we'll dive into today's discussion. Miss Madeline Higgins, if you would speak first, please.
Yes, hi everyone. I am Madeline Higgins. I graduated from Georgetown undergrad and MSB in 2016, and then immediately turned right back around to join the School of Continuing Studies to pursue the Sports Industry Management program. I graduated from there in 2018, and during that time was able to get a lot of experience in the sports industry management world. I worked for the Washington football team for a little bit, a couple of boutique marketing agencies, and then found myself interning at NBC Sports Washington. Then went on to go join the national sales team for the regional sports networks in 2018 in New York City. And that is the team that I currently serve on as a marketing specialist in sports partnership development. We do a lot with the Olympics, local sports, local golf, really just a whole range, all the big four leagues, and most recently been really engaging a lot in the sports betting category, which is growing quite rapidly, but excited to be here and share some of my insight on the Olympics.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Ms. Higgins. And I would like to ask Mr. Craig Escherek if he would share a little bit about his background.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Frederick. I was at Georgetown for 30 years, from 1974 to 2004. And I was actually born at the hospital, so I've been around the campus for a good little while, lived in the area my entire life. And this is my 14th year as a professor at George Mason. I'm the academic program coordinator for the sport management program and the internship coordinator as well. And I was a basketball coach before that for 25 years. And I also have a kind of a side hustle. I'm the color commentator for college basketball. Been doing that for about 15 years for a variety of networks, and continue to really like what I'm doing. Been involved in the sports industry most of my adult life, and can honestly say that I've had some great jobs and still enjoy getting up in the morning, going to work every day. And looking forward to talking about the Olympics. I was a assistant coach and a scout for the Olympics in the '88 Seoul Olympics for the men's basketball team. And it was probably the best sports industry experience that I've had. It was a wonderful 2-year stint where we scouted and watched teams from around the world, picked our Olympic team, and then went over there and played against teams from all over the world. So fantastic experience. I'm looking forward to talking about the Olympics today.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing your background. I always like learning about colleagues, even those I'm just meeting, because like you, I love the business. I've enjoyed every moment, every year I've been in it. And so it's nice to meet a SIM alum. It's also nice to meet a Georgetown coach and again, industry colleagues. So just to recap quickly, today's conversation is about sporting events in a post-pandemic world. Specifically today, we'll be talking about the effect on the 2020, now 2021 Tokyo Olympics. As we all know, the sports world, like every industry, but probably a bit more visible than many industries, has been deeply affected by the pandemic. And so we'll dive into the conversation today to take a look at how it has impacted the Olympics, which are just around the corner. I'd like to start with Madeline, if I may. How is NBC handling the coverage of the Olympics, especially given the IOC has said that no international spectators will be allowed at the event?
So we're really excited that the Olympics are getting off the ground again this year, and will be the first major global gathering since the start of the pandemic, which is very exciting and also extremely fitting that this will also be NBC's largest media event to date. We'll have 7,000 hours of coverage across 2 broadcast networks, 6 cable networks, multiple digital and social channels, and we're serving both English language and Spanish language audiences. So whether you're looking for exclusive highlights on Twitter, the regular prime time broadcast on linear, or one of our studio shows coming to Peacock this year, which is going to be an exciting new addition for our coverage. There's really going to be something for everyone, and you'll be able to access it with ease and get really anything you're looking for the Olympics. And it's been really important this year, more than any year in past year Olympics, for us to provide this breadth and depth of coverage, because there is just a very strong desire for a shared experience that's, larger than your immediate family or your quarantine pod. So to really identify and come together around something after a absolutely brutal year and a half for so many reasons, it's going to be important for us to capitalize on that. And going even just beyond the coverage of medal counts and event results, we really lean into the storytelling, which, has been a huge component of the Olympics in years past, providing some background on the athletes. But this year we've really leaned into it, whether it's something silly like Hoda Kotb and Jenna Bush Hager trying out new Olympic sports on their show, like skateboarding, or very more engaging and educational things like our podcast series, My New Favorite Olympian, which profiles some lesser known US athletes. It's really, there's going to be something for everyone, and we're trying to not only provide the coverage of the medal counts and the results, but tap into that emotional and storytelling factor as well. Oh, you're on mute. Sorry.
I'm going to probably just stay off mute and hope nothing unusual happens in the background, because I am good for that. Thank you for giving me the heads up.
No problem.
Despite being in a pandemic, I promise I do that like once a week. Check, I've done it for the week. But it was really nice to hear you elaborate about the storytelling aspect. As I was listening to you, I know, of course, I'll be watching the Olympics like many, and I do think fondly about the Olympics beyond just the athletes and the competition, and as you mentioned, the medals, because many times they'll showcase the families in the stands or the supporters, give us backstories. And so it will be interesting to see how that unfolds because everyone wants to feel a part. So I'm very excited to hear how you will handle it and looking forward to seeing that. Mr. Escherick, do you have any thoughts about the Olympic coverage or the lack of international fans being present?
Well, I think it's going to be interesting when you're watching on television, if that's going to impact the atmosphere and what's it going to be like to watch a track and field event or basketball or handball or wrestling or boxing. And, half the stands are going to be empty. I think right now they're saying they're only going to permit about 50% capacity right now. And hopefully maybe when we get closer to the Olympics, they'll loosen that up a little bit, but it'll be interesting to see what the atmosphere is like when you're watching from home. And then some of the new sports, I'm looking forward to seeing some of the coverage of the new sports. Surfing, I think is probably the first time they've had surfing in the Olympics. I was surprised to see that they're having karate for the first time. I figured karate had been in there before, but it hasn't. They're going to have wall climbing, BMX cycling. I'm not a big BMX fan, but it'll be interesting to see what those events are like. 3-on-3 basketball is an Olympic event this year in Tokyo. And so it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. And then with COVID, are there going to be some athletes that are favored to win medals that may get sick over the course of the Olympics and be eliminated because of the fact, they're testing for COVID constantly over there? What impact is that going to have on the actual performers? And then what impact will it have on the Olympic Village?
Excellent. I really appreciate your thoughts. The last sentiment that you shared actually resonates with me. I didn't mention it in my intro, but I'm a NC State undergrad, Ohio State graduate school. And if anyone has followed the College Baseball World Series, you'll see that they were making it literally one game away, and they were eliminated due to COVID protocols by the NCAA. So it will be interesting to see if that has an impact on athletes and their qualifications as we move through the Olympics, because COVID is an evolving thing, including the testing. Given that COVID is such a significant part, that's the perfect segue to my next question. Keeping in mind insurance costs, possible payouts for the Olympics, how would NBC, IOC, and Tokyo have been affected financially if the Olympics had been canceled altogether rather than simply postponed? And that question goes to the both of you. So I started with Madeline last time. If I may start with Craig this time.
Well, the Tokyo taxpayer is already on the hook for anywhere from $15 to $25 billion worth of expense right now. And so they're going to lose that money one way or the other. They've already built the facilities. They've built the new infrastructure that was needed for the facilities. So certainly, if they have a significant sports industry infrastructure, they can use those facilities down the road, but they've already spent an awful lot of money. So if they canceled the Olympics today, they're not going to be able to recoup, the cost of that. And certainly there's no way the insurance is going to cover that amount of money. I think we're going to have an Olympics. I don't think they're going to cancel it. I think the Olympics has become too important for a lot of these countries that are hosting. And I think, but for, a huge number of Japanese citizens coming down with COVID, I can't imagine that they're going to cancel these Olympics.
And Madeline, what would your thoughts be along the same lines? What do you think the financial implications would have been for IOC, NBC, Tokyo itself, if there was a cancellation as opposed to a postponement?
Yeah, so obviously it would be, the terms of the NBC and IOC partnership are publicly available. So if people are super curious, they could find out some broad numbers likely on that. But obviously, it would be a pretty difficult financial impact if we're not able to recoup on that investment. There are insurance situations that would apply, but thankfully it was postponed. And because interestingly enough that it was postponed, Tokyo was almost to the finish line in terms of their preparations when the games were postponed in March. And because of that, they were able to shift their focus for the remaining period of time that we had between July and March of 2020 to focus on, health and safety protocols and how things could operate most efficiently so that we would not have to postpone and then cancel, which I think has proven to be why we're still on track as of June 30th to get things going with certain restrictions underway. But it's been a little extra time to prepare, I think, thankfully.
Yes. I agree with both of you. I think that the Olympics is going forward. I think most of the last year, the energy and the strategy has been built towards pushing it forward as safely as possible, because the magnitude of not moving forward is it's immeasurable financially and probably unimaginable. The Olympics is not just a part of the sporting world, it's a part of culture, it's a part of the world. And globally, it's one of the few things that kind of brings us all together, all attention, all eyes at the same time in a goodwill spirit. So I completely agree with both sentiments. Staying in that space a little bit, but also including the COVID conversation that Craig introduced a moment ago. We all know that COVID triggered a lot of funding being cut, particularly for what those of us in the sports world call non-revenue sports. And to be clear, non-revenue sports are those things that do not generate revenue in the positive. I would rather phrase it that way. Actually, I choose the word Olympic sports more often than not. And in that spirit, you have revenue sports such as baseball, football, men's basketball, things of that nature. And non-revenue is typically thinking of things like golf, soccer, lacrosse, things in that space. So again, with that in mind, and knowing that there has been cost cutting across those types of sports, how do you think it's going to affect Olympic athletes, but also female athletes going forward, or even how it has already affected them to date? And either of you can take that question.
Well, I think that the NCAA is such a feeder system for our Olympic movement that any cut in sports for non-revenue sports at any school across the country, particularly some of the major programs that field some great athletes in gymnastics, swimming, wrestling, diving, volleyball, those sports that feed right into the Olympics, it's going to have a big impact on our Olympic movement. And I sure hope that, we think long and hard about whether or not, we should be doing that, and we come up with other funding options. I know Stanford, about a year ago, Stanford cut, they made an announcement. Funny thing is, the Stanford AD used to be the Georgetown AD. And Bernard Muir, and Bernard cut 7 or 8 sports, and most of those sports were Olympic sports. But all of a sudden, the year plays out, and now all of those sports have been reinstated. They came up with funding from somewhere, from alumni, from businesses that were interested in supporting those sports. So almost like college basketball is the minor league for the NBA. College football is the minor league for the NFL. The minor league for our Olympic movement is the NCAA and college athletics. If we don't fund those sports, and as you said, Dr. Frederick, a lot of those sports are sports where women are very much involved, then we're impacting both our Olympic movement, and you could also create some Title IX problems too.
Absolutely. I love that parallel too, to say that NCAA sports are the feeder system for Olympic sports, because that's in effect what it is. What would your thoughts be, Madeline, along the same lines? Do you think that the trend that has been a result of COVID in terms of cutting funding for non-revenue sports, AKA Olympic sports, do you think that that will continue to have an impact on Olympic athletes and or female athletes?
I think the immediate repercussions, because there are already kids in the system who have their sights set on their future. I don't think we'll see an immediate impact for those kids. But, you know, as it pertains, I mean, I was captain of the sailing team when I was an undergrad, and we're not even NCAA. We are a varsity sport, but we're governed by a different body. So we do a lot of our own funding, and we rely on alumni, families. You know, it's a very self-funded sport in a lot of respects across the entire country. We, not to brag, but we have a couple of Olympians in our Georgetown alumni history. So, you know, it is there, and it's a challenge, but the sailing world has been doing that for years and years, just because that's the way it is. So I wouldn't be surprised if other sports who are used to being funded, well-funded, would turn to teams like sailing or like lacrosse or any other sport that's not, you know, typically well-funded, and look to them for ways of how to raise money so that their programs can continue and they can maintain interest for prospective athletes coming up in the system.
Excellent. I really appreciate you giving your personal experience as it relates to sailing, because I think the other dynamic here is those Olympic sports, even if they're at major NCAA Division I, Power 5 institutions, oftentimes are not receiving the same level of support, and or they're living off the financial support of their more profitable sibling programs, such as football and men's basketball. But on the other side of it, maybe there's an opportunity here where they get more creative with their funding and more innovative with how they fund those things, because we do look forward to the Olympics every 2 and/or 4 years. And this is, again, where these student athletes are oftentimes coming from. This is their training ground. So let's pivot a little bit and let's focus on Japan itself. There's been some unrest there. Do you think that that is going to affect countries who were looking to host the Olympics, and they may hesitate or hold off from their bidding to hold the Olympics and or other large-scale events in the future?
I think the cost of the Olympics is the biggest impediment for the growth in being a host, being a sponsor. I think the last time they bid out the hosting for the Olympics, there were not very many countries, very many cities that were interested. In the end, they ended up awarding the summer to Paris in 2024 and the Summer Olympics in 2028 to LA, more because there were few bidders than because they were trying to award, you know, the Olympics to the 2 best cities. And I think that's a big problem. I think the International Olympic Committee needs to think long and hard about something that the NCAA has done recently, which is have a rotating number of cities host the men's and women's Final Four, because there's some cities that just do a better job, and they're built in such a way that they can house, there's more hotels centrally located, and it just becomes so expensive. I mean, China is supposedly spent, we have no way of knowing, but they supposedly spent about $40 billion in the Beijing Olympics, that's 2008. That's, you know, 13 years ago. And the Sochi Olympics were between $30 and $40 billion. And we have no way of knowing really how much money Russia spent either, but that's pretty expensive. And what taxpayer in the United States wants to spend or be billed for that kind of money? We don't have the money. Greece almost went bankrupt hosting the Olympics in 2004. And so I think the IOC needs to think long and hard about how we're funding these Olympics in the future, and also whether or not there shouldn't be a permanent location for the Summer Olympics and a permanent location for the Winter Olympics.
I think that's a great assessment and a very interesting one. I know that's an area that I've read a lot about and studied myself, especially as I've taught it to others, is the Olympics really have become cost prohibitive for a number of reasons, and unrest would not even be at the top of that list. And I know I've even seen photos from Sochi where the venues are just completely abandoned. So it's partially a cost prohibitive issue. It's also an issue of infrastructure. Like, what do you do with these facilities if you don't have the economy and or the population to sustain them or recycle them? Not every city has that ability. I think Atlanta, which is 1996, that goes back a ways, is probably one of the last cities that actually did a very good job of repurposing their venues and their facilities, dorms that became for athletes became dorms for schools there. And the Olympic Stadium became Turner Field and so on and so forth. So unrest is definitely an issue, but I think, Craig, you're very right to say that it's more a cost prohibitive issue. It'll be interesting to see how they handle it. Madeline, do you have thoughts in that space about the expense and or the unrest that may keep cities from bidding?
Yeah, I definitely agree with Craig and all of that on, just we can't keep, as luxurious as it is and fun to go to all these different places, we're getting to a point where it does need to become more practical. I was actually just in LA this past weekend, and they've already begun all of this construction around LAX to get prepared. So, obviously that will likely become very useful because the situation around LAX is not fantastic, but, going to other countries and places where they're not able to utilize it, to your point, is, it's becoming a bit of an issue.
Yes, and it's so interesting. LA kind of became the default. I actually was living and working in Boston when Boston put in the bid. And I don't know why people didn't see that coming, but the taxpayers there pushed back hard, strong, and fast. And the irony in that was one of the reasons they thought Boston was a good city is because it has so many colleges, it has so many facilities that maybe they could go there. There's always going to be infrastructure costs, but maybe they could be minimized. But the impact on the city was a bigger concern. Like, did they have the public transportation to sustain that type of population coming in for the summer and things of that nature? So I can only imagine. I've been to LA under the best of circumstances, and it's a challenge. So as much as I look forward to the 2028 Olympics, I might have to brace myself because that could get really interesting. So let's see, what about ticket costs? So we know that Japan, due to safety, of course, has decided not to permit international attendees, including parents of athletes and families. So they're going to be relying on the local population. How do you expect them to manage ticket costs? Do you expect them to decrease the cost to attract more locals, or do you think that they will raise the cost in order to offset the loss of revenue? And this question goes to both of you, but I'll start with Madeline.
I think Madeline's network is going to put pressure on the local organizing committee to let people in for free, because if you don't have fans, you don't have atmosphere. And if you don't have atmosphere, then the advertisers for NBC are going to get mad because there's not going to be viewers. And so it'll be interesting to see if they raise that cap from 50% to maybe 75%. If I owned a hotel in Tokyo, I would be pretty mad right now because, all of the foreign fans that were going to come to watch the Olympics, they've been told to stay home. And so all these rooms, I'm sure they built new hotels for the Olympics. They had to push it back from 2020 to 2021. And now no foreign fans are permitted. Be interesting to see what they do with all the volunteers that an Olympics has to hire to actually put on an Olympics. Be interesting to see what they do. But I think, I suspect NBC and all the other networks from around the world are going to start telling the organizing committee in Tokyo to start letting people in for free.
I love that you jumped in there because I was actually going to start with Madeline, but I love that you jumped in there because she can answer that part of the question too. And in full transparency, lifelong sports professional, now sports professor, that atmosphere thing is huge. That is a significant part of the sports world that people take for granted. As someone who used to work in marketing, we were kind of in charge of the show, of the experience. And with that said, my transparency moment is even I have not watched as much because it's missing that and I'm a purist. I love sports. I've made a career out of it, but I definitely have to say that I have dialed back how much I've watched this year simply because it's not as fun without the crowds. It's not that without the atmosphere. So to his point, I'm gonna toss the question to you, Madeline. What do you think? Do you think NBC and the other networks involved will do that? Or you can go back to the original question. Do you think that the ticket price will go up or down, depending upon how to drive that attendance?
I think for the Olympics specifically, I mean, I don't think NBC is going to be forcing anyone to go anywhere. But, you know, also, if it's no international spectators, what makes it fun for Americans to watch the Olympics in the United States is to see Americans there cheering on the Americans. So if it's only Japanese spectators, it's only going to be fun if the Japanese are winning most of the events. While it will be great to have more people there, you know, NBC has been preparing for the broadcast coverage since they announced that fans would not be allowed to yell. It was going to just be golf claps, was the original plan. So, you know, we've definitely been thinking of all the different ways to make the viewing experience more engaging, and, you know, drawing on things like the NBA playoffs last year, which everyone thought were going to be awful and quiet, and ended up being really cool because you had all the virtual fans and you had a bunch of crowd noise pumped in, and it ended up being pretty fun. So looking for different ways so it's not just, you know, a quiet, empty swimming pool and you can hear the splashes.
Yes, I think creativity is intuitively the thing that drives innovation. But to me, and I think most of you would agree, innovation oftentimes comes out of challenge. Challenge can drive innovation even more so than just sheer creativity. And this is going to be one of those moments. And we have looked across the landscape, and there's been places where the sports world, including the NBA, has done it very well. There's been other places where it's been questionable, but it will certainly be interesting to see how the Olympics moves forward, because it's such a different thing. And it does only happen every 4 years. And we have a pandemic that unfortunately happens once a century. And the sports world, however the pandemic affected any side of the business world, the sports world didn't look the same a century ago. So it's unprecedented in a different way for us. I have a couple of questions that are coming into the chat, and I'll go to the first one. But before I do, this is my moment to remind people, if you have questions, please pop them into the chat. If you have questions about the Olympics, particularly the Tokyo Olympics and how the pandemic has impacted it, that is today's conversation topic. But we have experts here from the field with diverse backgrounds. So if you have questions outside of that space, please feel free to post them and we'll do our best to answer. And I prefaced it that way because the question actually is outside of the Olympics. So, and I've got this project has landed squarely in my lap. I have something brewing in this space in the near future. Recently, the Supreme Court ruled 9-0, basically unanimous, in favor of college athletes to be able to benefit off of their name, image, and likeness, also known as NIL in our world. So before, current college athletes were competing at the Olympics were not allowed to be sponsored or receive prize money, where they would have to forfeit their amateur status. What are your thoughts on how this ruling will affect their sponsorship and their status moving forward? And I don't have a person, so whomever feels comfortable tackling that topic.
I mean, I think it's going to be great for athletes individually. It gets a little trickier when you start talking about schools and how that affects programs. But I think for individual athletes, you know, it's only beneficial for them to be able, you know, just you're in the spotlight, you're creating millions of dollars worth of revenue for other companies. You know, it's only fair for them to be able to profit on, you know, their own abilities when in just a matter of 4 years, they'd be able to on their own.
Yes, and I would offer, even though I'm a moderator, not a panelist, I would offer, we've seen this before. We just saw it in reverse. There was a time when the NBA players were not allowed to play because they were paid. They were not to be considered amateurs. So I think that as the NIL becomes more commonplace, and in fact will become commonplace, the justices have set that in motion, whether the NCAA was ready or not. This too will lead to an evolution. And I think that it will be tricky at first, but they'll find their way. There was a time when we didn't think that professional athletes should be competing in the Olympics because they were not considered amateurs, they were being paid. But voila, we've gone, a few decades now where that's actually the norm. So there'll be a new normal, I'm sure. Do you have thoughts about that, Craig?
I have a lot of thoughts about it.
I look forward to your thoughts since you have so many.
And my first thought is we'll see. We'll see what this does to college athletics, and hopefully it's a positive thing. I think that the thought that a college would own your name, image, and likeness for the rest of your life just because you played there for 4 years is kind of silly. But I always worry, and if I'm looking at this, if my son or daughter, I don't have a daughter, thank goodness, but I have 2 sons. But sorry, Madeline, and sorry, Dr. Frederick. But if I did have a daughter or a son that was playing college athletics, my concern for them would be, they're in school to learn as much as they possibly can educationally, and anything that detracts from that, their athletic career is going to detract from that. And now you have the ability to also make money. And as long as it's managed properly, just like you manage your social life, hopefully everybody that goes to college has trouble managing their social life. I had a lot of players that played for me that had trouble managing their social life too. And so this just adds another layer of thing that is going to take time away from playing the sport that you've committed to, and hopefully going to class and learning as much as you possibly can. So that would be my concern. And I'm accused of being, overly paternalistic, and people like me are accused of that. But that's a real concern for me and I'm talking about college athletics in general. This is going to be a big change, and I hope it's managed properly, and I hope the students manage it properly. I hope we don't have a whole lot of people that flunk out of school because they're more worried about their social media account and their TikTok and how much money they're making and how much money their teammates making and they're not making. It's going to cause some more headaches. And as a former coach, I don't like causing coaches headaches either. And this is going to cause coaches and athletic directors a lot of headaches. And let's hope that it does benefit. I'm hoping it benefits college athletics.
I agree. I remember doing a paper on this when I was in grad school, like a while ago. So this is not a new issue, even though we're seeing the first significant developments in this space. And in many ways, the NCAA's hand was forced even before the US Supreme Court's ruling, because states were taking it into their own hands. And I agree with you that if it's managed well, it could be a really positive thing for student athletes and the industry as a whole. But I also predict that no matter how well they manage it, there's going to be a lot of unexpected things to navigate. And I think you highlighted a few of them. I don't think that most people are thinking about, well, how do they manage their social life? So now how will they manage their brand? But it's absolutely valid. So it'll be interesting to see what develops. I do encourage people again to stick some questions in the chat. We're happy to address them. And I will go to the next question that's in the chat. If the Olympics as a whole is able to receive adequate international coverage, even with limited amount of journalists, international journalists, do you think in the future publications and media outlets will refrain from sending people to large-scale events to cover them? I'll start there. There's a 2 parts to that question, but let's start there. So this year, because of the COVID restrictions, journalists will flock to the Olympics, but there will be significantly less, of course. But this is not just an Olympics problem, because as we know, the pandemic is global and it has an ebb and flow to it. It has not gone anywhere. And as I told somebody recently, last time I discovered no diseases come and go away. We just learn how to manage them. So do you think that they won't send journalists in the future to mega sporting events? Or do you think that when we get to some level of safety, that population of journalists will continue to cover those events live?
I think this year will be a pretty big test case. Probably actually more so maybe the Winter Olympics, which will only be 180 days after the Summer Olympics this year. Because I'm assuming by then it will be a little bit more opened up. So maybe more journalists will be able to attend the Winter Olympics. But speaking from NBC, we have a lot of people who are going to be based at their homes and at our headquarters in Stamford, Connecticut. So it's gonna be different this year for sure, and gonna see how it works, preparing for a lot of different strategies. But I'm not sure how much if the cost and the product and quality of the production, if they balance out, then maybe we see. But I think it's always, for journalism especially, to have people on the ground in real time. There's no comparison for that.
That's a great point. I think that's an excellent point. I think another thing too, as you mentioned, the fact that the Winter Olympics will be just 180 days later as opposed to 2 years. I think this also, we have to recognize that this really will take the entire cycle of a 4-year Olympics to really understand what's going to happen, because we know where we're sitting in 2020, 2021, but everything could look very different, not just 180 days from now. That's the first iteration of what it will look like, but 4 years from now, or 3 to be exact. It could be a very different thing, and we could be more closely back to normal, or we could have a new normal. Those are all considerations. I think those are valid questions. Would you have anything to add, Craig?
Well, I think that the concept of the pool reporter, when you're covering an event like the White House press conference, there's all sorts of pool reporters that actually report for more than just the network that employs them. And I think with all of the platforms, I'm going to give Madeline and her network a plug here. With all of the platforms that NBC is going to deploy for the Olympics, it's going to be pretty easy to watch everything. I mean, if you want to watch rock climbing and you want to watch every event in rock climbing, you can do it now. And so it's going to be easier for fans from home to see. And I'm sure that there are, Associated Press, UPI type of organizations that send stories in multiple languages to countries around the world. And the IOC has a press pool also. So I'm sure that the IOC and the organizing committee for Tokyo probably put out stories all the time that these countries and their local affiliates can pick up pretty easily.
So part 2 of that question is basically the long game. How do you think these changes will affect people who want to become sports journalists or those who are currently in the field? Do you think that this will be a deterrent, or do you think that their interest will still be there if they want to become sports journalists?
I mean, I think it's always things are always in flux. When I was going into college and later in college, I really wanted to be Erin Andrews, and then I got more familiar with the sports world and everything, and then I wanted to be Katie Nolan, and now I'm realizing that I don't necessarily want to be on camera, even though as I speak, recorded on camera right now. I think if it's something you're passionate about and that's what you want to do, and you find yourself in that area and you're enjoying yourself, then people will stay with it. But as positions continue to change, I think there are even more opportunities than ever before for people who are interested in joining the sports industry. So, it's all going to change, and people will find their way, whatever passions they want to pursue.
I love that. And I'm like you. I started out in sports information, and then I landed in marketing. And I can promise anybody, even as recently as 7 years ago, if you had told me I'd be a professor at Georgetown overseeing sport management, I would have really thought you might need to look elsewhere, because I'd probably not be that person. Most of us who go into sports have some very keen ideas about what we want to do or what we think we want to do. And they evolve, they change. Some of us stay in that lane, some of us don't. But I think the thing I take away from what you just said, which is what I would offer to the participants that are here today, is sports if nothing else has happened as a result of this pandemic, we have seen that sports is not just leisure. It's not just pastime. It's a significant multi-billion-dollar global industry. And there are many industries, even those you don't think of, that are sports adjacent. We're a part of the world. We're a critical part of the world. And so if you have a passion for it, there will always be opportunities. What they look like may change, but there will always be opportunities. So I love that you framed it that way. We have another question in queue. Keeping in mind what Madeline just said, and based on what happens this Olympics, will it massively change how, and I'm just gonna put a word in here just to help folks out. There are such things as large scale events, but Olympics, that's more like a mega event. So we call those mega sporting events. Will it massively change how they operate going forward? The Olympics, the World Cups, this is a pretty lengthy question, as it pertains to crowd control, media, athlete entourages, do you think those changes will be maintained, or do you think there will be pushback to pre-2020 or pre-COVID protocol and practices?
I mean, I think it's all dependent on how things pan out this year and how we continue to move forward. You know, it's unfortunately we can't see that far into the future. I really wish we could and figure out how everything was going to be set up going forward. But you know, it might, when it comes, especially I kind of hitched on that, the athlete entourage. I could see, you know, you having less of a, you know, +1, +2, however many, you know, even just today when they announced, you know, that breastfeeding Olympic mothers are allowed to bring their baby, but then, you know, it took a beat for them to think, oh, well, someone's probably going to have to be there to watch the baby while the mother is, you know, breaking records in track. So I think it'll end up being kind of maybe a case by case basis, and definitely will change as things unfold with how society is moving forward.
Yes, and I always like to look backwards, even as we think about what things will look like forward, because a lot of people don't know this, and yes, I'm dating myself, but the Super Bowl was not in February, pre-9/11. And so that's a mega sporting event that had to move due to security and safety reasons that created a new tradition out of it. It didn't bounce back to what it looked like before 9/11. And the safety and security protocols, I know, I teach it, does not look the same. There was always safety and security protocols, but it looks very different now than it did pre-9/11. So I think if you think about the Olympics the same way, we don't know what it will look like, but we do know that sports tends to be adaptive. We tend to find a way to move forward. Do you have thoughts along those lines, Craig, about will there be massive changes?
I think it'll bounce back. I was watching a baseball game last night, and it was the Nats playing somebody. I can't remember who they were playing, and it looked like it did 2 years ago in terms of the stands and the people behind the home plate. Golf tournament this past weekend in Connecticut, Travelers Championship, fans, place was packed. The PGA that Phil Mickelson won, you know, you had fans following him up to the 18th green. So I think things will move back to where they were. I think we'll learn. I think, you know, people will adjust and learn, and we'll have to make adjustments in the industry. But I think we're going to go back to full stadiums and to fans drinking beer and standing next to each other and all those things that we did pre-COVID.
Yes, adaptive. The industry is very adaptive. And if you ever work in the industry, you'll know how adaptive we are, because we make the best plans with the most details right down to the second. And almost always you have to adapt. So I think that just comes with the territory, including mega sporting events. So let's end on a pretty light note, but still an interesting one. For those of us who have not attended an Olympics, let alone coach one, Craig, can you speak to that experience?
So the first Olympics I went to was '84. Our coach at Georgetown, Patrick Ewing, was playing, and I was an assistant coach, and I went out there to watch him. But I didn't just attend basketball events. I also went to one day of track and field in the Coliseum in LA. A high school friend of mine was a rower. And so I went to a lake that was about 30 miles away from LA and watched him compete. And then for some strange reason, I went to a water polo match. I've never played water polo, but I thought it would be interesting to see Pepperdine's campus. And it was fun watching these other events. I wouldn't describe coaching in the Olympics as much fun as being a spectator, but it was the best sports industry experience I've ever had. It lasted 2 years. I was appointed in 1986, and then we started scouting the best countries around the world. We watched the former Yugoslavia, their team play a bunch of times, the former Soviet Union play a bunch of times. They were very good. Puerto Rico was very good. Brazil was very good. And so we watched all those teams play numerous times, traveled all over the world to scout, and picked our team. And we had some really good players on our team. David Robinson, who played for San Antonio, Danny Manning, who's actually an assistant coach at the University of Maryland now, Dan Marley, who played for the Phoenix Suns, Mitch Richmond, who played for Golden State, Charles Smith, who was a former Georgetown University point guard and Big East Player of the Year that year in 1988. So it was a fantastic experience. The amount of fans that come from all over the world, which we're not going to have this year, was part of why the experience was so much fun. Meeting coaches from around the world was fun. Meeting some of the players from all around the world was fun. But, competing for your country at the highest level, it was frustrating because the United States that year, we ended up winning the bronze medal. We didn't win the gold. The only game we lost was to Russia. But, overall, fantastic experience. And I would recommend, going to an Olympics to anybody. And even if it's just a couple of events, it's really incredible. These are incredible athletes, the world's best athletes in all these sports. But it's also a great event to meet new people, to meet people from all over the world, and to enjoy a different city. Obviously, 84 was in LA. But 88 was in Seoul, Korea, and it was South Korea's opportunity to show the world, how they've recovered for the Korean War, the magic that is the Korean economy, the South Korean economy, and what they've been able to do, and all these great companies that they've been able to build. It was their coming out party, so it was really cool to see that as well.
And the way the question was phrased, I'm going to jump in. I actually have attended an Olympics. I, by no means, have coached in Olympics, but I have attended an Olympics. I attended the Olympics here in the States, 1996 in Atlanta. I was in graduate school at the time, and I tried my very best to find an opportunity to work the Olympics because I was young in my career, very enthusiastic. I did find an opportunity to work, but couldn't find housing. That became the challenge. Thankfully, I still had an opportunity to go as a spectator, and I just agree with everything that you said. Of all the sporting events I've ever been to, and probably because of the scope, the size, and international nature, the Olympics by far is one of the most significant and one of the most interesting. I think I saw basketball, and I also saw gymnastics, rhythmic gymnastics to be exact, women's basketball, and because the tickets were sold out for men, and synchronized swimming. So again, if you're a sports fan, you may have your favorites, but the Olympics is a great opportunity to see things that you may not otherwise see. And it's still awesome because they are the creme de la creme of athletes in the world. I know we think very highly of our sports here in the States, but we're not the only ones good at things. And so the Olympics is a great place to see that. We're coming up on time. Let me see if there are any more questions in the chat. There are not. So I hope that you've enjoyed our discussion today. And now I would like to turn it back over to my colleague, Ashley.
Thank you, Dr. Frederick. Thank you all again for joining us for today's webinar, and thank you for our fantastic panelists and moderator. This was a great conversation with the Olympics less than a month away. As a reminder, the recording of the webinar will be made available on our website and YouTube channel in the next few days. You will also receive a link to the recording in a follow-up email, along with a survey that we ask you to fill out. The survey is linked in the chat as well as on the QR code on the screen. So thank you all again for taking the time out of your workday to talk a little bit about sports with us. We're looking forward to events in the future. And as always, if you have any questions, please send us an email at the address listed here, and be sure to follow our channels listed here for all news, events, and updates for everything McDonough alumni.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.